What's going on, everyone? Check out what's coming up this week on Legacies.
Fair play. This industry will beat the shit out of you if, over time. So.
Oh, yeah. You seem to be a master at getting SKUs listed.
It's a running joke at the office, I'm pretty much batting 100,
Kind of our first experience in an event where people were coming up and saying, hey, we listen, we enjoy the show, and it just felt really good. And so a really quick shout out.
A little validation is nice. Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome to Legacies. I'm your host, Tom Ritchie, joined by Wesley the Wizard Bowles. Wes, how you doing?
Morning.
You notice my Can Expo voice? Can you notice? Can you
Can Expo? You mean grow up?
Or sorry, grow up. I apologize. Yeah, I'd be long recovery since Can Expo, but no, this is my grow up voice. I almost didn't have a voice this morning, like it was gone.
Yeah, I'm exhausted. It's always exhausting doing a day walking the floor at one of those expos. I don't understand how those brands and most of the people there who are there for like the 3 days, the award day, and then bud tender days today, right? So 3 days of that, I'd be absolutely wiped.
Yeah, good on Randy for getting that expo all ready to go. I couldn't imagine the amount of logistics that have to go into it, but it was great. Fantastic time. I want to ask what your highlight is, and I think I know what it's going to be. But I do want to know your highlight. What was the highlight of the show for you? I mean, there was a few, but if you only had to pick one.
I think I will shout out the Mendo Pavilion. I think that was the pavilion, for anyone who doesn't know. So obviously Grow Up had a massive floor. They had tons of booths for all these different retailers and brands and a lot of different grow equipment and things like that as well, and lighting and irrigation. But Mendo Medical had their own kind of pavilion where they brought all the brands or many of the brands in that they have available on their marketplace, and all in one kind of big pavilion. I think that was probably, for me, seemed to be the most successful area. It was the place that was packed the most. It seemed like the most engagement was happening. I mean, we spent a reasonable amount of time in there, so maybe we're a little bit biased, but a lot of brands in there, a lot of great brands in there. We saw some interesting products, and I think that was a highlight for me. Yeah, I think it was a really good. I'll tell you what was not a highlight, though.
Okay, what was that?
Was lunch. Waiting.
Oh, fuck. 2 hours in a not very busy restaurant to get your food was a little much. Unfortunately, we joked and thought, hey, you'd be prepared and be staffed up when there's an expo taking place. It was funny because we just sat down to grab a quick bite, and then we've got Kevin Varner joining us, and Matt Sparrow, and Marty over at Loonrise, and Jennifer Macron, and everyone started just funneling in. I'm like, oh fuck, they're gonna put their orders in. We're never getting out of here.
Yeah, we were the fun table. We had
it was a good time. I love the Mendo Pavilion as well. Anytime that you can see a bunch of brands under one roof, I think makes a lot of sense. They've gone above and beyond to be able to organize this. Yes, we're partnered with Mendo to help drive membership subscription, because we believe in it. We believe in this platform. We never want to see medical cannabis go away. Obviously, makes a lot of sense. And if we continue to support and show that progress and more brands coming on and availability across Canada, then hopefully Health Canada never makes that horrible decision that medical cannabis doesn't make sense for Canada. I mean, that's where we were born, right? Everything was medical originally.
Yeah, I think vets utilize it too much for that kind of thing to disappear. I mean veterans. Oh yeah, they're using their full allotment every single month, right? And they absolutely use.
There would be a revolt. And Mendo, huge supporters, obviously. One that I'm very excited about. So we only got a quick minute maybe with Glenn, 6-1 Charlie. I think they're launching on Mendo exclusively, but Glenn is a combat Army veteran. I don't want to say Army. I'm going to say combat Canadian veteran because I'm not sure if it's Army yet. But really cool story. The backstory behind the brand, why 6-1 Charlie exists. We need to get him on the podcast. I mean, that's going to be an incredible story to share. So excited about that. There was also one other brand, and I don't want to get too far ahead of myself.
Whipping out your samples here.
I got, and there was a lot of samples, obviously, and for us, we're not sample grabbers, right? We obviously want to grab samples and show support of the brand, try different things, but we're not just in there to grab samples. We try to spend as much time as we can with the brand and understanding their backstory and, you know, why they exist and what products. But a couple that caught my eye especially was by Dopo. Now, I do not know if these are available in market yet. They were in the Mendo Pavilion, so obviously they will be available on Mendo. But the one here is Tropical Citrus Splash 3D drink, they call it. So you add it to 4 ounces of water. It is an effervescent with 10 milligrams THC, but very cool.
Yeah, it's like a little bath bomb for your drink.
Yeah. I don't know which camera would be best, if that even. So it's a little lime wedge. You drop it in. Even when I got home late, obviously. And you know, shared. I just threw all the samples on the counter because I need to categorize everything and understand what's what. And of course, my daughter is like, "Oh, what'd you get?" And I'm like, "You can't have any of this. I need to seriously sit down and assess what all is here." Anyways, very cool. I love product innovation. I don't know if this is the only product similar to this on the market. I didn't have time to do the research, but very cool. And they also have another one. I know you're not a big tomato, clamato type fan, but they have another spicy tomato splash beverage drink, which make a Caesar. Just make a Caesar. Brilliant, especially with summer coming. You know,
Yeah, really,
Caesar
really
Sundays,
great ideas out of there.
right? Yeah, and I'm not into alcohol near as much as I used to drink, and not that I was an alcoholic or had a problem, but I just don't really drink alcohol that much. So, great way to have a virgin Caesar, but still infuse it. So, good on Dopo.
I think the other one to call it too, again, a lot of great brands.
So many.
Mendo Pavilion. We don't want to, we don't have time to call every single one of them out, but it was really nice to see one thing at Atlantic Cultivation. Their booth was there,
Yeah,
and it's really nice to see Tantalus Labs
Yes.
still kicking and still there. They were an old client of ours, so it's really nice to see. I know Dan Sutton's no longer there, but it's nice to see that brand still kicking around.
Yeah, a revival. And it looks like they've got some fire genetics still. That was one thing that Dan did very well over at Tantalus, was ensure that the genetics were where they needed to be. I am very excited. I don't want to keep pumping Mendo's tires, but very excited to try the Mendo Select product. There's been a lot of buzz around it. But obviously, they've got, I think, 3 different cultivar in market right now, and big on the Durban Poison, which is an old school legacy strain or cultivar. Gonna try it and see where we land on it. But I'm excited. Like, I love seeing the progression, right?
Yeah, we got a nice little variety pack. It's a single sample too, but it's got 3 joints in there. So you've got Royal Moby, you've got their Durban Poison, and then the nice one, the interesting one in there for me is the Purple Mountain Majesty, because it's low THC, but also it's a 1-to-1, so it's 8 to 12% THC and CBD.
Oh, wow.
Which is interesting. So, but
Very
cool.
cool.
Very excited to try the Mendo Select stuff.
Yeah, but good on the team. Obviously, Mark and Jay and Josie over there putting on a fantastic opportunity for the brands. Makes a lot of sense. I think they're going to do the same in Edmonton. Is that correct? They have plans to do that?
I believe there's a grow up happening in Edmonton. Yeah.
So continue. I mean, it's a great opportunity to bring the brands in. Obviously, the brands need to be at these shows because that's where the retailers go. I mean, there's a lot of other opportunities. You notice I'm wearing a Pixie shirt? I forgot I had this. I got this. So I got to see the Pixies live in concert. It was just before Massey Hall was about to go under construction again. I haven't been in Massey Hall since the renovation.
Phenomenal venue.
Have you been in it since the reno?
Yeah, I've been pre and post. And my first experience at Massey Hall, I saw. I don't know if you're familiar with Dream Theater. And Dream Theater is typically a type of that, like, they can fill stadiums, like they fill Budokan and stuff like that. But Massey Hall for me is one of the best experiences for seeing a concert, because there's no bad seat in that house.
There isn't,
because of the way the seats rise and the different levels. Yeah, you're just as good at the top level as you are at those mid levels. It's phenomenal, and the sound quality. It's unbelievable.
It was built for sound. It's no different. Like, I've been at David Letterman front row recording sessions, and the Ed Sullivan Theater was designed for sound. But back to Massey, I haven't been in it. I forget, the number was staggering, the amount of money they put into that renovation. And I think there was a lot of naysayers at first. They're like, "Oh my God, it's historic," and it's like, well, if you want it to remain, you kind of got to do some work to it. Yeah. But I didn't realize, because I think we had showed up I think just as the opener was going on, so all the curtains were still, the backdrop curtains were there. But when the Pixies were performing, it was nonstop 2 hours. Like, I'm not even talking like, oh, hey, talk to the crowd. It was nonstop. Guitar switches, roadies bringing out guitars in the middle of songs. Concert finishes and they pull back the curtains and it's all lit with all the nostalgic items from bands performing past, right? Like like Led Zeppelin, I think, has been there. But anyways, yeah, I found this in my closet. I'm like, what? Oh, I forgot all about that. So,
Speaking of concerts and stuff, do you have anything lined up this year for concerts? I've got 2 on the books.
No, and I'm ashamed to say that, because we do try. There's some decent concerts going on in Ontario, especially
This year in Ontario I'm seeing Iron Maiden again, which is I
What?
think this is my 6th time seeing Iron Maiden. Dude, I love Iron Maiden, and they're playing at Budweiser stage, so that should sorry. Is it
I
Bud-
love that venue.
I can't.
So
I think
much.
it's that. We have grass seats, and I'm perfectly okay
Okay.
with that because it's fucking awesome.
You can still
And
walk
then-
around. Like, I saw the Tragically Hip there way back. Like, I mean, I was like 22, 23. We had grass seats and there was a lot of grass being smoked or smoked. But the last time, so I was there last summer. Love that venue. I love that you can just wander around. You want to smoke a joint, you can go over and smoke a joint in the consumption area. I saw Queens of the Stone Age there last summer, and
that would have been a good show.
it was, you know this, I'm a huge Queens of the Stone Age fan. We had great seats too. For me, I'm getting older and planning more, right? So it's like, hey, if it rains, I want to be under, the vestibule type areas to make sure I'm not getting wet. Because the show goes on, doesn't matter unless there's, I think, thunder, lightning, that sort of thing. So, who else have you got? So you got
the
Iron
other
Maiden
one, which I'm super excited for because I've seen them before as well. But Red Hot Chili Peppers, one more time. I'm really excited. I think this is 3 or 4 for me seeing them. I always go to see them with my best buddy Josh. And the last time we saw them, they were great, but the problem was they played at the Sky Dome, which for sound,
I'm so confused on that now. Is it Rogers Center now? Is it Scotia? Which one's Scotia? Which one's Rogers?
I'm that '90s kid. I'll always call it Sky Dome. I really don't
exactly.
care.
I remember,
but it is
yeah.
Rogers. It is the Rogers Center.
Okay,
and that venue is awful for sound, obviously, but they're a massive stadium band.
I saw them there. I think it was maybe not the last time they toured, but it was probably 2012-ish, somewhere in there. And you couldn't even get seats. I don't know how I got seats. I was on some Rogers thing. Finally managed to get them, and I told Tanya, I'm like, they're nosebleeds, like big time. Not that, and it's based on price points sometimes too. Obviously, you want to get a little closer, but I found because we were so high right at that crevice, the sound was just boomy and echoey, and it was
it's awful.
My ears rang for days. It was so bad.
So I might have my venues mixed up. Actually, I think Iron Maiden is at Scotia.
Okay,
which I saw Rush
that's Arena,
there,
right?
And there's
yeah,
and that was a really good show there. And I think it might actually be the Chili Peppers who are at Budweiser stage. Either or, see them both this summer, and I'm super excited.
Well, there's a lot of so the Pixies are touring again. I know that. My buddy Dan has some tickets to that. Shout out, Dan. You can buy some extras. I know it was a birthday present to you, but I would love to hear from those that tune into us. Who are you going to see? Who is a must band see? There's an Elora Gorge festival that happens. And there's usually a huge lineup over the weekend. I think there's camping and all this that goes on. They usually have some really good bands that show up, but I know a lot of our, listeners, watchers, I don't know, a lot of the community that help support us, they are huge into music. We see a lot of posts coming from concerts, so certainly want to hear from them.
Is it, do you mean Riverfest Elora?
I think that's what it is. Yeah.
I've got that pulled up here. And, this artwork is wild. Let me...
They've been doing this for I don't know how long now. Yeah. So, oh my God, they got the Violent Femmes. Wow.
Yeah, we've got Sunday Archives,
August 16th, 17th, 18th.
Trouble Charger. There's a name I haven't heard in a while. Damn.
Wow. But you introduced me to on the ride back from Grow Up yesterday. Who was that again?
That was Mr. Marcus King.
The Marcus King Band. Great.
Young man.
I listened all the way home.
With the young man with the voice of a 50-year-old saint. Like, he's just unbelievable.
Yeah, incredible. anyways, so looking forward to some concerts. I haven't got any planned, but like everything, I'll probably just a last minute it in, or someone will go, hey, do you want to go to something? And that's how we'll end up there. But
Yeah.
anyways, very excited today. We finally have Todd from Rosin Heads on. Our schedule, his schedule, we got it to align. The stars have aligned. Mr. Sweet Tooth.
Willy Wonka's favorite grower.
Dude, he's been legacy before legacy was really legacy. He goes way back, and in those early days of confectionery, goods, he didn't care. He's still pumping it out. There was the baller box and a ton of different items that he was doing. So excited to connect with him. I joke and I say he's probably the crotchetiest man in the industry at times, but depends on who you catch and on what day you catch them. It can certainly be, highs and lows.
I mean, fair play. This industry will beat the shit out of you if, over time. So he's perfectly entitled to be.
Yeah, but listen, number one brand partner with us, quick to sign on. We've supported him as much as we can. He's obviously been very supportive with us as well. But, just love the branding. He's always on top of things. And to be honest, it's not because he's a brand partner. His chocolate is fucking phenomenal.
I was going to say, because if I've introduced I have a lot of friends from high school and stuff who have, always smoked joints and flower and stuff like that. And many have actually just never tried. They've tried some gummies and stuff like that, but they've never tried other categories of edibles and chocolate specifically. And that is usually one of Todd's products. Is usually the ones I will introduce them with and say, this is completely new for you. Try this. Yeah. Because I want to get them in right at that. That apex and then ruin
part.
And then ruin everything else for them. But it's usually, I like them all, but I'm in love with the rosin sticks.
Oh yeah, that's my number one favorite. I do like he's always got, he's doing some rotational SKUs right now, right? So, and he tries to do seasonal, I think, as well. But I love the truffles, any of them. I don't think I've come across one I didn't like. The yuzu coins are great. Even the he was doing the infused pre-rolls. Even those work fantastic. And I think
those are part of his dab collab, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Right. That's right.
So, and there is the other, I haven't, we're just about to enter this world of rosins and sauces and dabbing, right? Because thanks a lot, Alana. But now we're going to be on the hunt for a dab rig. But we both agree, one, we're not good with glass. Two, I don't really want a big dab rig kicking around. But anyways, I think, and we'll have Todd confirm, I think he has flour coming to market too, which will be very interesting. Kind of a deviation away from the chocolate. But I think anyone that enjoys the Rosin Heads product, they expect that premium quality. And everything that he's put out so far has been that premium quality. So, anyways, let's get him on.
It's crazy too, because I've been in dispensaries before, and I've asked specifically, knowing the answer when I go in, hey, do you carry Rosin Heads? And they'll say the answer is always the same. It's never like, oh no, who's that? It's always no, but I wish we did. Or like, when I'm talking to these bud tenders, it's
right. And I get answer. It, especially now that we've been digging in more to the world of retail. Obviously, we're close with Jazz, and he has retail, and he actually just calling me. He was just calling me 2 seconds ago. But it's really helping us to understand and become attuned with what's going on in the retail space. We obviously have other connections. Lisa is incredible over at Stoked as well. But really understanding how OCS manages how many SKUs they'll bring in, how it affects flow through, what the product availability is. So I get it that not all retailers can carry Rosin Heads. I get it. But they should because it's the same. I'll go in and it's usually the bud tenders again, or the flower hose. It's like, hey, do you have any Rosin Heads? No, I wish the same answer. No, but I wish we carried it. Or yes, or we're sold out.
Yes,
right.
Exactly.
And honestly, it's usually a lot of we're sold out. So I think, it's just a matter of continuing to spread the good word. I think that he has distribution into other provinces. We'll figure that out with him because we're about to spend some time with him, and it should be good.
Yeah, it's going to be a great episode.
All right. Well, let's take a quick break, and when we get back, we don't have Harrison this week.
We don't. We saw him grow up.
We saw him grow up. He shaved his face and completely fucking confused the hell out of me.
Threw me for a loop.
Yeah, he came up, put his arm around me. I'm like, fuck. And then he's like, yeah, as soon as he started talking, we're like, yeah, it's Harrison. Yeah,
Oh,
fucking lawyers.
that's one other thing we should mention about yesterday. I found it hilarious that so many people came up to you and you went and said to you, "Hey, do you remember me? We worked together in the past, and you did this." And how many times you went, "God damn, I just don't remember."
I feel you know me. I pride myself on remembering names and connections, and it's not. I swear it's not the dope that does it. I swear, but I think it's a matter of one, you're tired, you get up early, you travel to Toronto, you've got all this stuff going on. It's a whirlwind of activities. And then you're like, I know them. I can't, it's just not. And they're like, I know it's the weed, you're high. And I'm like, no, but then I start feeling like an even bigger asshole going, I don't know. But you know what? We obviously, everyone does this. We've attended, I don't know how many events throughout the course of, 6, 7, 8 years. We work with a lot of people, and sometimes I forget individuals. Even I think it's Aaron, Canna Collective,
Yep.
grabbed me on the way somewhere, and I'm like, oh my God, I know him. We've met with him. We've talked about his business model and everything. And I feel like an asshole when that happens. I really do.
Yeah. The one other thing I think we should do right before break is a quick shout out to the audience. It was really nice to see. It was kind of our first experience in an event where people were coming up and saying, "Hey, we listen, we enjoy the show," and it just felt really good. And so, a really quick shout out.
A little
to the
validation is nice. Yeah, I mean, we see it on the socials. Obviously, we're across all socials, but it is nice to know that what we put the time and effort into is getting out there. People are seeing it. We beat ourselves up, right? And this is maybe a call out to anyone that's a creator of some sort. Is you're not always going to get comments and interaction with your stuff. I don't do a lot of it myself because there's a lot, and it takes effort, obviously. But sometimes it's just a matter of it's cool, you've seen it, but you don't have anything really to add or say. You can give it a little like, but it doesn't mean that you're not getting seen or your content's not getting seen or that you're helping shape conversations, right? Which is what we're really trying to do, is just open the door. And I was honestly yesterday, I was very excited. There wasn't any like air of doom and gloom across.
No, there wasn't.
Right.
That's a
Which
good point.
we've seen, right? It was a lot of positivity. Obviously, there's a lot of collaboration, a lot of sharing of stories, but this industry is supportive. I don't like saying the community, right? This is a business. At the end of the day, it's a business. But it's nice to see that the brands or the LPs, the companies that are involved, they're 100% willing to help each other and support each other, share, commiserate, whatever it might be, but also look for solutions. And I think that, if we continue that, we'll see that across the other events. We'll see that across the industry, obviously. But it was just so nice. It was refreshing because we've been to some events that it's hit and miss, right? There's this energy of, the industry's doomed. Everyone's fucked. Right. And that's not the case. We know this because we speak with, brands consistently. But it is nice to see, and it's nice to see there's a lot of innovation happening still, and change coming. But anyways, excited for that.
Great. Yep.
Well, let's get Todd in. Let's see. Is he gonna be good mood? Bad mood? What mood?
I think we got him. I think we'll
He's
get
never
him
in
on
a
good
bad
one.
mood.
No.
This is what I love about Todd. He doesn't fuck around. He just says it straight. And to be honest, there's no time to fuck around and sugarcoat shit. It's either this is a struggle, or I'm seeing a success here, or fuck this company because I can't believe they're doing that. So we'll see how this goes. It should be good.
Let's bring him in.
Alrighty. We'll see you in a minute.
Hey everyone, if you're like me, you get overwhelmed by the product selection in this crazy cannabis market. Every 2 weeks, we drop a digital flyer with a curated list or featured products that you'll want to try. Subscribe to our digital flyer at thehighflyer.ca, and you can also check out our historical flyers to see the products that we featured with a selection that I approve of, and Wes certainly does. Check it out at thehighflyer.ca.
All right, welcome back, everyone. We're joined by Todd Neault of Rosin Heads. Todd, this has been forever in the making. We've obviously wanted to get you on the show to find out what the fuck makes your chocolate so goddamn addictive. How am I getting so fat? Well, it's from eating Rosin Heads. No, just kidding. It's fantastic, but welcome to Legacies.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. We're going to see if we can get you excited about some stuff, because most of the time we get to connect, you're very even keel most of the time, depending. And we joke sometimes, we say, listen, Todd wears his heart on his sleeve. If something's pissing him off, you're going to know during that day what's going on.
Yeah.
So anyways, we do appreciate you joining and sharing as much of your story as we can.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. So we're, I think you know the format. We typically get into, what's the history. Obviously, we've been working together for a while, so we are a little bit closer and understand a little bit more. But we do our research. We find some stuff out as much as we can, and then we get up to what's going on in the crazy world of cannabis and all your products and where they're distributed and that sort of stuff. But first, let's go back. You're a country boy.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah. No, I grew up on a farm.
Somewhat. Brooklyn, right? Brooklyn,
Yeah.
Ontario. So maybe not out in the cornfields necessarily, other than to grow some weed.
Yeah, no, pretty much. I mean, like that's really how it all started, right? When I was 16 years old, I was really struggling in school. Had really bad social anxiety. I spent a lot of my time on my computer when I was young, like, doing some computer hacking and, silly stuff like that, just because it was more fun for me to learn and focus than, try to be around people and have all those, social issues. So, I eventually found cannabis and, magically I was able to function again, right? Like I wasn't going to school, like I was really struggling. But being 16 years old, you can't really afford it. So like maybe one day a week I'd go to school. I ended up getting some weed one time with seeds in it. I'm just like, I'm going to go out to the cornfield across from my driveway and put some seeds in the ground. And then, I searched for weed with seeds and, back then, 30 years ago, lots of weed had seeds. So, I bought a whole bunch of weed that
Of
week.
course.
I bought a whole bunch of weed, that week, with seeds in it and just planted a bunch of different seeds. Some were like Mexican, they didn't finish, some did really good. That's just really how it all started, right? I grew just really for myself, but, I always ended up having some extra. So
It's just funny back in those days, you didn't want, depending on who you were, you didn't want your weed to have seeds. But in your case, you're like, do you have any with some seeds in it?
yeah,
Pre-irradiation days, non-feminized. You just had to hunt and search and see what you could find, right? I caught somewhere, and I want you to help us understand this because as long as I've been in cannabis, I started very young, 14, 15, which is technically not very young in the grand scheme of things, I guess, going back to, the late 80s, early 90s. Nowadays, with our own children, we're like, that's way too fucking early. Like, you're going to wait, you're going to hold on. But for us, growing up in a certain era, it was kind of normal, right? It was an entrance into, myself. I wouldn't say that my reasoning for not attending school was, social anxieties or anything like that. The draw was cannabis. I was going to hang out with friends and skipping school and smoking cannabis. And I was a dropout, right? And I have no problem telling my kids that, anyone else that. I went on later, in my mature adult life and got a GED and eventually went back to school and did stuff. But still, in those days, it was kind of just a cultural thing. It was, an escape from what was going on. And I assume for you, it was that, but it was also helping with those social pressures and the anxieties around it because, I have friends that are very similar and it gives them the ability to function. But one thing I want to unpack with you, because even with this amount of experience in the industry, I myself and quite a few of our audience, they're confused when it comes to understanding hash, different types of hashes, but going even further into rosins and resins and live resin and live rosin and fresh pressed. And like, it's crazy. But I caught somewhere where you had mentioned outdoor cannabis being better for hash or rosin. So that outdoor grow typically, and let's first understand that, and then we'll continue to build into your story. But I want to understand that before I forget, because that was a question that I had. Why is outdoor cannabis or outdoor growing cannabis better for that?
So I really feel that sun-grown resin is just better. It's more mature. It's had more sunlight. It's I just feel that the terpenes or the downside with outdoor typically is people treat it like outdoor, right? They grow so much of it. They don't handle it the same way as indoor when they harvest it. You know what I mean? The post production on outdoor is very different. So, you know, that's why outdoor has a bad rap. You know, it's not as good. You know, I actually disagree with that. You know, I prefer growing my own weed, smoking my own outdoor weed over indoor weed that I can buy. You know, it's the maturity, right? Like,
And obviously there are even under the regulated market, there's some very successful with very good product outdoor grows like Dabble and Loonrise, and we could go on, but
yeah,
incredible product. And the vast majority, I think, is pushed for processing. But then would come back to your statement that it's just a little bit better when it comes to that. You get that full spectrum potentially, and you know, you're dealing with that. But during that time, so, you know, I think similar to, I think I started with hash oil. You started with hash. Is that correct? That was your first experience with, yeah.
Yeah, growing up in Whitby, Brooklyn, we didn't see hash in high school till like, you know, grade 10 maybe. And like, it was few and far between. It was always hash, you know what I mean? Various types of hash, always really good. Like, I remember like greening out, you know, getting off the bus like 2 stops before my house, going down to like this park like we had in the wood. Like we made our own, like, you know, little area down there where we had bonfires and stuff, and there was a picnic table that we had carried down there. And I remember just going down there smoking like 3 BTs and like greening out and like pushing the rest of it off the table. Like, I'm never doing this again. And then, you know, the next morning before school, I did it. And yeah, there was like,
we always tell ourselves that. Oh man, I'm never doing this much again.
you know, I have such fond memories of, you know, the taste of, you know, those imported hash back then, you know, like the spiciness, the pepper, you know, the peppery, you know, I always used to put a piece in my mouth when I bought it just to, you know, see what it would taste like before I smoked it, kind of thing. And, you know, I chase the imports still to this day, but like, you don't find anything like that anymore. Like,
Yeah,
and you know,
it's drastically different.
yeah, and you know, the bubble hash, no matter how much they try to process it into traditional, you know what I mean? It just never has that flavor, right? It goes back to the genetic. Um, it just, you know, like, sure, you know, awesome gas, bubble hash, awesome fruits, but like none of that spicy pepper, like, you know, none of those tastes that I'm used to, right?
Well, when you cut your teeth into those traditional hashes that were imported, smuggled, let's say, because they were smuggled, you know, coming from by way of Amsterdam. So you're getting your Lebanese blonde hashes, or maybe it's Shiraz coming in from Morocco or something, or a dry sift that's been pressed, or, you know, even I loved, you know, back in those, you know, impressionable years, 16, 17, it was Jamaican gummy hash, you know, where they had run down the fields and processed it, and it was hand hash, and it was gummy and sticky as hell, and it was full of flavor. But you're right, it's those, in a lot of cases, I think probably some original land race strains that they were sun grown. They weren't growing it indoors, so they were getting that full spectrum of sunlight, the long days, and approaching right up to proper harvest, right? But expensive. Well, the one thing that we had said is the price of hash has not really changed over the course of 25 years, even in the legal market. That's accurate, right?
We paid $20 a gram back then, like $50 a half quarter.
Yeah.
Right. It was $20 a gram, $50 a half quarter.
Yeah.
We had like 2 main types of hash, right? We had like the blonde, actually we had like 3. We had the really, really hard blonde. Then we had like some lighter fluffy blonde that would like just, you know, you take a little piece, you break a little piece off, you heat it, and it would just flop up so much. And then, you know, we always had like the black, the Afghan style. A couple times we had Jamaican gum I saw, but I remember the first time we got weed, like really good weed. It was sold to us, you know, as indica, and we were like, "What is this?" And it was like sticky, you know.
What the fuck is indica mean?
It was crystally, like, and like I remember like being at my friend's house and like just laughing for like so long. It was just ridiculous, you know what I mean? And like the stickiness, like you couldn't cut this weed up; it would just like ball up, you know what I mean? So like you would just smoke like clumps of it in the paper, right?
It wouldn't keep burning. Yeah, I remember those types. And it's true, back then, you know, you weren't getting into, oh, this is a sativa, this is an indica, or it was weed.
It was weed.
Yeah. We always joke and say, no, it wasn't, we weren't searching. And then once you became familiar with certain strains, I still remember my first encounter with Northern Lights. And that's why I'm very nostalgic when it comes to this, and on the hunt for some original true genetics when it comes to this. But my first experience with Northern Lights, I don't know if it was because of the marketing aspect around it, right? Which wasn't really marketing. It was just someone saying, hey, this is Northern Lights, typically growing in, California and the northern regions, yada, yada, yada. And I'm like, sold, right? But it was bright and the high was crystal clear. And I was excited. I'm like, oh my God, I really like this. I got to find, never again could I find that supplier, I'll say.
We had a really nice Northern Lights haze. That just the flavor on it was super nice. We really enjoyed that one.
I think we'd both enjoy some of those older, like even the White Widows when they became, somewhat popular. When I started growing, I was like, I've got to grow White Widow. I have to grow White Widow. And I failed. Like I think it was more Green Widow than Black or White Widow. But anyways, so you spend your impressionable years experimenting and understanding, hey, this actually works for me, before even understanding, because there was no science or medical study saying, you have an endocannabinoid system and you have receptors and, these cannabinoids attach and they'll change all this stuff and they do, right? We didn't have that evidence. And I mean, predominantly because we weren't allowed to do any research on it. It was just a matter of, association and understanding, hey, it does work. But throughout that time, was it, because again, we've looked into this, we've discussed this, but you didn't jump right into the market and go, hey, I got to do something in cannabis. That wasn't until like 2015, 16. You spent, time doing database work and IT work. And Wes, keep note of that, because if we ever need an additional, systems failure expert, we can call Todd in. But was it in the back of your mind during that time that I really enjoy the plant, I want to do something more with the plant outside of growing for your own personal reasons and, probably supplying some friends? Was it ever there where you're like, yeah, I'd like to do something with this?
No, not really. I mean, like the reality is, the reason why I started my brand is, when all the legacy market dispensaries, the brick and mortar ones started popping off in Toronto, I hit them all, right? I have membership cards for them all still. I'm going to do like a cool collage or something one day with them, right? I've got like 20, 30 different medical cards, all the original ones. And, I hit every store in Toronto and I bought every single edible that was available. And a lot of them weren't good, right? There were some serious challenges, right? There was food safety nightmares, you know what I mean? Like, it's a miracle.
Yeah, because there was nothing going on there. It was just someone making a batch at home, and God knows if the cat shit in it. You didn't know.
Like, the reality is, like, the weed wasn't exciting to me, you know what I mean? Because, like, weed is weed. I can get weed. I can grow weed, like, just weed. Cool, they had different strains, but, like, for the most part, I still had that available to me, right? What was exciting to me was the edibles. So, I went crazy. I bought all the edibles and, like I said, food safety nightmares, inaccurate dosing, it was either stale, tasted horrible, no consistency, right? Everybody was like, whatever sold last week, everybody would make the next week kind of thing, you know what I mean? And nobody focused on one thing. So nobody did anything really well. It was like, oh, there's an opportunity there, you know what I mean? So nobody did anything super well. So I was sitting around one day with people and we had just ate some edibles and, we were talking about other brands and everything. And, they had mentioned that, a certain brand was really good. And I was like, dude, like I could hardly stomach that. And, they said, but I got so high off it. And I was like, okay, well, like for real, is this what it's come to? As cannabis consumers, we're thinking that it's a good product because it got us high. Like, what about tasting good? Like, don't we deserve that? And, growing up in a house, my mom used to make like really elaborate gingerbread houses, right? Like, lights inside, candy stained glass windows, like moving pieces. One year she made a whole city. It took up our entire dining room. It was like a firehouse, with fire trucks. There was a carousel from like a fair that moved, like it went around in circles. Everything was lit up.
Yeah.
It was insane, right? So I grew up in a house and I was around that. And when I first started, I just like, okay, I think I can do better. My first edible company, I don't talk about it very often, was called Edibles. And the reason for that is like, I was just trying to make a point that, these are edibles that actually taste good. They're edible. You know what I mean? That was like 2014. And that was crazy. Like I had my phone number on the package and shit, right? Like it was nuts. You know what I mean?
Holy fuck, that's crazy, man. Like quick way to target you. Oh,
My goal there was like, it wasn't my phone number, but there was a phone number, right? My goal,
it was a burner phone.
my goal back then was, like obviously I just wanted to provide better product. What happened after that? I got a job at a private equity company with some really influential and powerful brothers, entrepreneurs. One of them didn't graduate high school. Very similar story to mine. I got really close with them. You know, started selling them weed and stuff. It was a pretty cool environment, and just they really inspired me. Basically, you know what I mean. And just having that knowledge around me, without even having questions, just watching and understanding how they did deals and everything, it really inspired me. And the fact that they had achieved so much, with so little, I was just like, this is, it inspired me. So I basically, worked really hard on starting the brand Shattered Sweets. Had some really cool branding. Like for 2015, the branding was like amazing. I had a single page menu, but it was double-sided and it was like hard laminated like a restaurant. And, I was doing all the markets, started to really get, a bit of notoriety from that. The packaging was really cool. Like when you buy Pot of Gold chocolates, when you lift the lid up on the inside, you can see what the chocolate is. I had that. Like, it was a brand, you know what I mean? It was starting to see the evolution of branding, and there was other brands, but for the most part, it was like a Ziploc bag with like a cardboard sleeve slapped in it. There wasn't really anything like...
Yeah, we can certainly see, you sent us some of the sample packaging and what that looked like and the designs, and you can see that evolution. There's a couple of things that I'd like to add is, that experience, when you have a friend that's saying, oh, this is my favorite edible, and you're like, are you kidding? Like, that's shit. And it was, it's not unlike today where people are talking about price and potency, right? It's got to be potent. For me, there's never been a category, I'll just say category now because that's the way we talk, but where it would turn someone off of cannabis. The edibles, like, because not all edibles were created equal. You have, a friend making versus a grandma making, whatever, and they're infused, and one puts you on your ass for a day, and the other one was, hey, that was good. And I hated that, right? So you talk about greening out. I've had so many friends, even myself, green out on an edible going, I'm never eating an edible ever again in my life, right? And when you get into the science of it and you start to understand it, we're not going to geek out on that. But yeah, it makes sense. Like depending on the way the butter was processed, if it was butter, maybe they used coconut oil, whatever that carrier was, what was the process? Was it outdoor versus indoor? And how did they take how did they extract it? So I understand that and why that passion would be there to say, no, it's got to be better. But I love that evolution, I'll say from a marketing perspective, because, you're clearly one of the brands that markets, I would say probably one of the best in Canada so far, especially with the way the design is. But when we saw those samples you sent over for Shattered Sweets and then moving in the baller box, like crazy. Like you can see that evolution. I fucking love that because it's very reminiscent for me having that advertising background where you look at the evolution of any brand over time and you can see what affected its change and why, and when it was pivoting towards what the market was doing. So I love that. And I do apologize for interrupting, but I wanted to get that in there to say, we've seen it. We'll share what we can as well, just so people can see it and how that evolution took place for Rosin Heads and what you are today. So Shattered Sweets becomes a thing. You're doing things differently. Your packaging is different. Obviously in the Pot of Gold story, I mean, it made a lot of sense and we'll show that. I think we've got access to that. But that was around what, 2016, 17, right? When you started getting into the Shattered Sweets and pushing
that was
into
early 2016 when I started it. The menu, all that came, mid towards the end of 2016. So two things I wanted to cover on what you had just spoken about there. The first one is, about the dosing. I love to get high, as much as the next person, probably more than the next person, right? But the reality is, accurate, like, there's a lot of people, even in the legacy market to this day, who think it's cool or think, if I just put a little bit extra, people are going to like it. And do what you want. But like, to me, it's super irresponsible. You know what I mean? If I'm buying a 20 milligram, a 50 milligram edible, I want a 50 milligram edible.
Mm-hmm.
So like, as early as
That's right.
as early as 2017, I started testing my edibles. You know what I mean? There wasn't a lot of labs back then. I have lab tests, and I still talk to, the people that, were working at the labs back in the day. And, the very first lab test that I have is for ice cream. You know what I mean? So like, there's been a lot of different iterations, a lot of different products. But going back to what, and there was an evolution, right? So I was growing, I made hash, I did BHO, and then I got into edibles. And when I got into edibles, I like to focus, I really like to focus. I don't do anything else anymore. You know what I mean? Even growing, like, I got plants for myself, and, that's it. Right. But back to the evolution of the brands and everything. So, I always just try to improve. Like, that's just my motto in life. It's not just the brands, it's everything. So one of the great things about, the market days, was that you had that direct feedback loop from consumers. You would see them every week.
Yeah.
So you would learn what worked, you learn what didn't work, you learn what they liked, what they didn't like. You would also see all the other brands around you. You see what they were doing, what was working, what wasn't. So, you just take cues from all that. And it's funny because with every brand that I've had, I get to a point where I'm sick of it. I know everything that I've done wrong with it. I know everything that I've done right with it. And, like, it's time to evolve, kind of thing. You know what I mean? So that happened with Shattered Sweets really quickly. 6 to 8, 9 months after I launched it, I was approached by somebody who wanted to take it to Nevada. The branding was that strong, you know what I mean? So, that didn't go great, but, I let them take it. The only ask for me was, I'm still doing chocolate. I'm rebranding overnight. So like literally the next day I was a can of chocolatier. Right. And with Shattered Sweets, I was doing, like lollipops. I was doing vegan stuff. I was doing, I think my first product with Shattered Sweets was, either the Space Sponge Toffee, which was sponge toffee dipped in chocolate, or sorry. So the first product with Shattered Sweets was, apple hard candy dipped in caramel. So like a caramel apple candy. I called it Happy Hard Candy, I think was the name of it. The second product was the Space Sponge Toffee. And that's really what set off the whole journey in chocolate. I was dosing the sponge toffee, not the chocolate. And while I was dipping it often, the sponge toffee will come out with like a white film on it, bloom, right? And it looked bad. And me being the perfectionist that I was, even though it tasted fine, there was chemically nothing wrong with it. There was, no food safety problems. It just didn't look perfect. So I wouldn't sell it. I was throwing a lot of money in the garbage. So, I was like, I was like, what am I going to do here? So I found a chocolate making class at a local chocolate store in Mississauga. So, I have no idea what to expect. It's like a 2-hour class. It's like $80, whatever, right? And I mean, if I'm being honest, that was a lot of money to me back. So
that's a lot of money to me now,
right? I was working, I was doing IT, I was not making a lot of money, but I was in a really good environment, right? The private equity company, I was in a really good environment. So I went to the class, and I walk in, and it's like literally like people on dates and stuff. It's like, and I'm just so old ladies. And, like date night type vibes. And I'm like so out of place, right? Like completely out of place.
Yeah. So I'm just like, here to get people high, folks. Don't mind me.
So I'm watching, I'm learning. And really, I went there just strictly to learn how to temper chocolate properly. Cause it's pretty easy to read, okay, you got to hold these temperatures. You got to do this, you got to do that. But there was something wrong with my technique. And the really funny thing, and this is probably a good pointer for everybody here before I get too, my technique, what was wrong with my technique is I didn't let the thermometer I didn't let the thermometer take the time to read properly often. I was working too fast.
Oh,
Right.
okay.
But regardless, so I'm in this
Got
class and I'm learning how to, right. So be patient, people, especially with chocolate, be very patient. So I'm learning how to make chocolate and, everything's cool. And then, they show us how to do, shell molding, how to make shells. Right. And then they start teaching us how to make filling. Okay. This is 2017. A light bulb went off in my head. Nobody's doing truffles. Nobody's doing filled chocolate and cannabis. Nowhere in the US, like nowhere, no one's doing this. So I'm like, this is my thing. And then, from there, like completely obsessed with it. And the environment that I was in, beyond having access to those people, I had access to flavors because one of the companies that they owned, was a food company. So I would literally dig through the stock room, like almost every day, pick out 2, 3, 4 flavors, bring them home. And like all day, my mind was racing. You know what I mean? I was developing these recipes in my head. I'd get home and like, I have to slow down. Okay. And I just banged out recipe after recipe after recipe, right? Tested them, figured out which one was good, which one was bad. And I literally became obsessed with chocolate. The thing that I liked about chocolate, the thing that kept me going was with IT, there's no tangible, there's nothing you can look at and say, yeah, fuck yeah, I did that. You know what I mean? Like, nobody's coming up to you in the office.
Yeah.
Nobody's coming up to you in the office, giving you a high five saying, the network's going so good today. Nobody gives a shit, right? Like IT, you're either getting yelled at because everything's fucked up or everything is going good and people think you're not working hard enough, right?
And
like
no recognition. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Thankless fucking job. Yeah.
Right.
For sure.
So with chocolate, even after I took that course, I came home and, the first truffles that I made were like salted caramel and, there's air bubbles in the chocolate. So, the caramel's oozing out and there's all these problems with it, right? But I did it. Okay. So the next time, so how do I get rid of these air bubbles? There's progression. You know what I mean? I can see that progression. There's tangible output, right? And then from there, like I remember being at markets and people having their chocolate sitting on ice packs because it wasn't tempered properly.
Okay.
And the second you took it off the ice pack, it would
tempered.
melt.
Okay, yeah.
It would melt, right? So just the fact that I knew how to temper chocolate was good, but the fact that I had all these recipes and the fact that, you know what I mean, I had learned all this stuff was even better. Okay. So, I developed a portfolio of 50 recipes for Canada Chocolatier, right? Like I had a 4-page menu with Canada Chocolatier. I was in all the a lot of the brick and mortar stores, more mail order than brick and mortar. All the raids started happening in Toronto, so I pulled out of a lot of the brick and mortar stores, right? I didn't want to end up in the evidence locker. So I stuck to, people, sales, who's this Canada Chocolatier? Why are we finding Canada Chocolatier at every store that we raid? Right. So I didn't want that narrative. So I stuck with mail order, for quite some time. And then, legalization came about in 2017, I believe it was 2017. Yeah. Or 2018. I don't remember. 2017. And,
it was rolling out ACMPR there. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right.
And then it was announced, that cannabis would be legal, but edibles, they were still figuring out, what would be legal, et cetera. So edibles was like essentially a year later. But as soon as I knew that cannabis was becoming legal and edibles would be legal shortly thereafter, I started reaching out to people in the legal industry, right? And I knew nobody. So I went to the Health Canada website. There wasn't a lot of LPs back then. So I figured out who all the LPs were. Went to their website, tried to find an email address, on the website. Typically I didn't want like a contact us or investors. And back then, like all the websites, pretty much one of the only email addresses you could find was investors at, you know what I mean? Cause it was like the
right,
green rush, all that
stuff.
Yeah,
for sure. Yeah. Everyone wanted something then. Yeah.
So if I could find an email address, that would give me insight into the email convention at that company, right? Is it first initial, last name, right? First name, period, last name. And once I knew the email convention for that company, I would research who the CEO was, and then I would send them a deck, like just out of the blue. You know what I mean? I must have sent about 40 emails back then. And, I had like 27 meetings. It was insane. It was like a whirlwind. You know what I mean?
Wow.
It was absolutely insane.
Yeah.
And nobody knew if chocolate was going to be legal. Like people were thinking, like it might be very cautious. You know what I mean? So nobody knew if chocolate was going to be legal, but people wanted to talk to me, right? So yeah, it was crazy.
But that shows that hustle there, Todd. Like that shows the hustle. So and that's where you've got individuals that sit back, they're sidelines, they're look at the success, like, oh, I'll never get there. Everyone forgets, just as you just pointed out, that if you're not industrious and hustle, and it doesn't mean hustling people, it means hustling, period. It means taking that time, in your case, learning those email conventions and understanding how am I going to get in contact. It's no different than building any other company. If you're starting from nothing, basically, and you know that there's someone that can help give you a leg up, reach out, right? You have to take that shot. And that shows it wasn't, Rosin Heads wasn't overnight. We're building this story right now, right? Rosin Heads was far from overnight. This was happening, raves, markets, different iterations of the brand moving up to where Rosin Heads would be born eventually. But I mean, it was probably exciting, but it's challenging as hell getting to that point where someone goes, yeah, I want to meet with you, Todd. Oh, send me that deck. Let's take a look at it and let's meet.
Yeah, it was hard though, right? Because like, as exciting as it was getting all those meetings, I mean, I would go in those meetings like full on panic attack mode. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
First couple meetings, I got laughed out of the room, right? And then, I started getting better. Okay, what am I doing wrong? What questions stump me? Really focusing. Okay, how am I going to answer this? How am I going to answer that? And, every meeting just got better and better, and then I started, instead of people laughing at me, everybody loved the product, but, my deck was like, if I'm being honest, like I still have copies of the deck now and I look at it and I fucking laugh, right? Like, like it's fucking hilarious. I'm surprised I even got meetings, let alone a deal, right? Like, holy fuck, excuse my language, but like,
it's like but don't excuse your language.
It's like, you don't know what you don't know.
It's like my early days creative writing. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
I thought I did a fucking awesome job back then. And like, if I'm being honest, I didn't do the deck. And while I was working at that private equity company, like, one of the financial guys slapped it together for me. You know what I mean? And, I'll never be able to thank that guy enough, I'm sure. But, yeah, like it was right. And then I started getting to the point where people were saying like, Todd, like, this is great. We like the branding. We love the product, but like, I don't know how you expect us to commercialize this. Right. And, then, I really finally got to a point where, I had two offers on the table. Right. They were very different offers, and all those meetings and, all the different offers, all the potential LOIs, right? Like there could have been other offers, but, I turned them down before we talked about it and just like, no, that's not going to work for me kind of thing. Right. And, back then, not knowing anything about how big the industry is going to be, like, what are you worth? You know what I mean? You're a black market guy. Like,
right.
Sure, I can show you my sales, but like, are you going to believe me? And like, is it even relevant?
Right.
You know what I mean? So like, these weren't easy conversations. You know what I mean?
Yeah. You're not claiming that income to be able to show it. Yeah. You're a black market dude. Like, yeah. Wes, you have a question?
Sorry, Todd. You mentioned something earlier. I think it's really important. You talked about the feedback loop for you from customers in the black market was particularly good for you, right? It was a sounding board for you and it allowed you to improve fairly quickly. What do you feel is missing in that feedback loop today in the legal landscape? Because, I see a lot of brands doing it really well, and I see a lot of brands, quite frankly, not doing it well, right? Like, you can log on to Reddit any day of the week and see some brands getting ripped apart, and there's no engagement. There's no one from these brands is trying to jump in and control the situation, or not even control, but, let customers know and let those people know, hey, we've heard you. Thanks for that feedback. But what do you think from your perspective is missing, or is maybe beneficial or not so beneficial in that feedback loop today?
So I gotta be honest, I'm actually not great at any of this, like not at all, right? This is where I find that I'm struggling. Like I have awesome products, the branding's awesome, but engagement with customers, and like, especially on Reddit, for example, that's hard for me. There's just something about Reddit that, I'm not into. But like, I think I've made it very well known, and I think like I'm so accessible on Instagram. You know what I mean? Anybody can reach out at any time, and like literally they get a response back from me within minutes. So, I'm really good that way. But like, as far as Reddit goes, just because, like the nature of it, and there's a lot of angry, miserable people in the world. And, like I choose not to engage. And I really don't like, I don't consume media at all, right? I don't watch TV. I don't listen to the news. I don't listen to the radio. What I allow into my life is, a little bit of Instagram, and I really try to limit that. And on Instagram, I don't, for the most part, I really don't follow a lot of people. I follow companies, just to understand, stay in tune with what's going on in the industry. I follow my friends, I follow associates. I try to follow back, all the bud tenders, all the people that show me support.
The one thing that we want to point out here, though, Todd, is the fact that the industry is not designed in such a way where, in those days, in the market days, you've got your product there, you've got your customer in front of you. You see what your competitors are doing, and you're getting that direct feedback. But in this market now, you can't. Let me not say you can't. You have to get creative on how you market to consumers, and the channels are not designed in such a way that you're going to get that feedback, whether it's instant or not, because now as a consumer, I've got information on the back of the bag. I want to call the 1-800 number. It's not necessarily going to go anywhere, right? And you can't put your Instagram handle on there. So the consumers aren't going to seek you out that way. And not all consumers are going to be that, they're not going to be on Instagram necessarily. They're not going to start engaging with you there. So I think that the system is not designed to be able to have that conduit of feedback now, which is why companies, even like ours on High Flyer side, exist to help connect as much as we can and garner that feedback and share that feedback. But it's I think it's just the state of the industry and what it is, and why certain reform is required, so that you as a business owner, because every business needs to know what their consumers thinking, right? And unless you're having, focus groups and study sessions, and you're actively trying to engage, which takes an astronomical amount of time to be able to do, when you're already trying to re-innovate or innovate and put product to market, and dealing with OCS and BCLD and all these other things going on, and sales agencies and marketers, and there's so much. Like, how are you able to do that? So it doesn't seem that feedback conduit for you specifically with Rosin Heads has necessarily been an issue, because one, of the product is so premium, right? It's a great product. But in those cases, as Wes is pointing out, is what is that challenge now, right, for you, which is, how do you get that feedback? How do you know that this Yuzu coin is popular outside of sales, right? They're enjoying it. There's repeat buys. Do you have to use that as your metric? Like, what do you use now? How do you gauge it?
Yeah, I mean, like the reality is, right, like Rosin hasn't been in the legal market that long, right? So, the time it was in the legacy market, and if you look at the baller boxes were designed just for that reason. That's why every baller box had 2 flavors. And that's why there was a baller box like every 2 weeks, every month. And there was a lot of launches, with a lot of different flavors. And, there wasn't a huge quantity of any of it, right? Like people had misconceptions that like maybe Rosin Heads was a lot bigger in the legacy market than it was. Like Canada Chocolatier was far bigger in the legacy market. Rosin Heads was simply an experiment to understand where to go, right? I'm not playing like I'm not rushing here. I mean, this is a long game. Like I'm thinking in years. You know what I mean? So the reality is, everything that's been launched from Rosin Heads, I've had that feedback. You know what I mean? And the reality is, there's a good majority of the recipes that are coming up that I've already got that feedback for. There are some challenges though, because I will say that the feedback in the legacy market doesn't mean that it's going to hit in the legal market. You know what I mean? Like the carrot cake and the pistachio, the feedback in the legacy market on those, insane. They didn't do very good in the legal market. You know what I mean? Like those.
Why is that? Like, I mean, they're the same consumers at the end of the day. Like, generally.
I don't know that it's the same consumer, and I think for whatever reason, as much as people want to say they're very adventurous, and cannabis is an adventurous thing. Maybe especially for certain consumers where they're new to the segment, maybe being new to cannabis is almost overwhelming for them, and then a flavor being put in front of them like carrot cake chocolate. Like maybe that's just too much. It doesn't compute. I'm still trying to figure out the reason. And like, if I'm being honest, I might try some of those flavors in coins. Like I don't know, because they're super strong flavors. But another thing that I feel is missing from the industry is the way that the events are designed, and what these events have become. Like it's literally like often it's trick or treating. And that's how budtenders treat it. And it's like, you almost feel abused as a brand sometimes, because like, they don't even want to talk. They don't want to hear. They just want you to jam their bag full of stuff.
Let me ask you that specifically, because I did want to ask this, and then I want to go back to the transition from Canna Chocolatier into Rosin Heads, specifically because Grow Up was there. Wes and I were there yesterday. Mendo did a fantastic job making sure that there was a lot of brand support there. For Wes and I and others, I mean, buyers, retail buyers, they want to interact. But I think what's happened is, as you're about to point out and are pointing out, is that it was like a trick or treat. It was a sample grab, which is not cheap for brands to do. I mean, the bottom line on that cannot be something that the financial people like to see. But what's happened is it's almost conditioned the brands to, someone steps in front of you. It's like a step and repeat. Someone steps in front of your booth, it's sample, where I'm wanting time with the brand to understand, what's your history? Where you produce? What's your process? What type of genetics are you using? And I can't even get that information in some cases, because it's a lineup of people just trying to grab samples, right? So please continue on that, because I think there's some events that are very conducive to getting your product distributed and helping with that. And then there's other events that, and we won't mention names, but there's other events that it has become a sample grab. And it's literally, we've seen this on Instagram. You've got a bud tender, love bud tenders. They need to be supported, obviously, but they're not the decision makers in some cases, in a lot of cases. But they're walking out with $200, $300, $400, $500 worth of samples. And I'm thinking, that's their load until the next event.
Yeah.
And
like, to be honest,
until the next event comes along.
Imagine getting a deck, right? Hey, do you want to participate in my event? Do you want to sponsor my event? We want 200 gift bag items, 300 gift bag items. And it's only going to cost you, X amount of dollars for you to give away free product. Like I've got to pay you to give you product, like for real,
right?
So
and your product's not cheap to
no,
produce.
Like it's crazy. You know what I mean? And I don't really see the ROI there. And most people, it's too loud. And you can't have proper conversation. So I'm trying to focus my efforts on going to stores, engaging with bud tenders. I didn't go to Grow Up, but I did go to an event last night, so I could still see people, could still network. And, there were 4 really good conversations I had last night, that are, very promising. Just like it's so much work for, you know what I mean? I do see though, like there's certain sampling programs that do seem to be getting some traction, that do seem to be working, where there's QR codes, there are surveys done and everything. But again, it's almost like they're paid reviews at the end of the day. Do you know what I mean? It doesn't feel organic to me.
Some of them can be, yeah.
Like it just
yeah.
I'm all about organic, like this being organic, this being authentic. You know what I mean?
No, that makes sense. And I mean, when you look at your roots, I mean, it makes sense to want to grow organically. And when there's opportunities, bless you, when there's opportunities, obviously you want to take advantage. But there are some good programs that they use analytics to understand you're not carried here. We've got programs to get samples to these retail buyers. And then there's a feedback loop. And that's the biggest thing that we preach is, giving a sample out's one thing. Do you know when Wes and I we received a lot of samples, we turned down a lot of samples too because we're like, we're familiar with your brand. We don't need a sample. We're good. But they, I think Grow Up, they do a good job of making sure you've got a QR and the brands can scan them. But in all honesty, Wes and I had our QR code scanned twice yesterday out of, I don't know, 20 different samples that we may have gone home with. And we're thinking, and we were even asking, we're like, scan this. We want, because we're building the future, right? We're trying to build the future of what this looks like. And we're like, we want to see that engagement. I'm going to reach out to you, brand, just so you know. And I'm going to see, one, how long does it take to respond? What kind of information or peripherals are available for me? Because we want to build this industry up. We want to be able to speak to what works and what doesn't work and promote the programs that do. But you're right, when it's just sending samples out for the sake of sending samples out and you're not getting the feedback, and even if it's negative feedback, there has to be feedback. If that loop is not closed, you're screwed. And it was all for naught. Not only have you paid to participate, you've paid for all your samples and your time, right? Where that time could have been, in your case, back in the kitchen, baby. You got to make something different, right? So I think that there's obviously flaws that we hope to see change, and we'll continue to challenge the ones that we think are complete bullshit, because there are some that are bullshit and they don't work. But people continue to be taken advantage of or take advantage of. But for Rosin Heads, because you talked about, it's not very old in the legal market. So let's go back to that. So Canna Chocolatier was born 2017 into 18, correct? And somewhere in there. And then, so what was going on with Canna Chocolatier, and then what gave birth to Rosin Heads?
Yeah. So 2019, like I said, I lose my train of thought often, but we were talking about, all the meetings, the whirlwind there. So I ended up selling Canna Chocolatier to Hexo, right? Back then they were the $1 billion startup, right? I really thought that was the right move, and the deal was right. There was actually some money involved. You know what I mean? Not just stock. There was actual cash. Funny story about that though. When I went so basically I went there. I gave them a USB drive, and they handed me a check. I went back to the hotel room, called my wife, like full on panic attack. Like, oh my God. All right. I didn't cash the check for like almost a month. You know what I mean? Like, what if they want this back, kind of thing? You know what I mean? So, I got the job, obviously, started working at Hexo, started developing some chocolates there. I think everybody knows Hexo ran into some problems. So, they basically, got rid of, the edible department. And, I had negotiated a really high salary because I sold them my brand. And, they were basically laying off all the people with high salary. So they stuck me in the R&D department with all the scientists, right, to kind of hide my salary. And I ended up, for like a year and a half, like teaching pharma scientists about cannabis. You know what I mean? And it was really interesting especially because,
that would be cool.
We were working on, right. But I learned a lot about, proper science protocols, designs of experiment. Like, I learned a lot in return. Right. So it was actually like so great. And, while we were developing our hash, there's certain things that you do to hash, right? Like you heat it, but in their minds, like we're degrading it when you heat it. And like, trying to like get the pharma scientists to like understand these things was, challenging. From there, I went to like new product development, and it was like, building product concepts, you know what I mean? Like we spent several months and we just built product concept after product concept after, like we had decks galore, like every category, like it was insane, right? Like Hexo like had this idea, they were going to be this machine, they were going to have all these products, they were going to license them around the world. Like, they were going to patent them. They were going to do all these medical studies. Like they had big plans, you know what I mean? So it was super exciting to be there. But from there, after the new product development, because, they saw all the products I was coming up with, it's really cool and everything, they moved me into category management. And, category management's, a pretty challenging role, right? And like having no experience in it was hard, but they put me in charge of the extract category, right? And so there wasn't a lot of SKUs there. I launched the first hash in Canada, the OS hash. Then all the line extensions for the hash. I launched the first meter distillate device in Canada, which was the OS Click. Then we did like,
I remember that.
Yeah. Then we did
remember that.
we did an edible version of that under the Bake Shell brand, which is like Twist and Drop or something. And it's funny though, right? Because at Hexo, like the OS Click, when I wanted it to be called Dispense a Dab. You know what I mean? And the idea was, the idea was that, you know, because it had the metal tip and stuff, that you could just like dab with it, right? Like you could just drop it in your banger. You know, they were scared at dabs, right? Like Hexo was totally scared at dab. And the other component to that is we wanted to sell it to SQDC, right? And SQDC, like, you know what I mean? Like dabs, like
nothing over 30,
right?
Cannabis
So,
2.0 is bad.
And it's funny though, because like almost it happened with almost every product that I launched, that I wanted to launch at Hexo, that, you know, as it went through the pipeline, you know, as the executives got involved, as other people started putting their opinion, you know, going through the stage gate product, the product would change, going through the stage gate process, the product would always change. And then at the end, the product that we launched was never what I intended it to be. You know what I mean? It's just like, you know, okay, like guys,
that sounds like big corporate.
all the coolness has been taken out. And, you know, like I sit with marketing at the beginning, you know, telling them the concept, everybody's super excited. At the end, like me and marketing would be talking offline. It's like, dude, this sucks now. Right. So, you know,
sounds like cars. This is what happens in cars.
Yeah.
We get excited seeing these concept cars are going to come out, and then, oh my God, what the hell did you do to that?
Right. And, you know, in category management, I work really close with the commercialization team, the marketing teams. So I basically learned everything that had to happen to launch cannabis product. You know what I mean? The product submission process, everything that had to happen, right? This is a 3-year journey in Hexo. And then Christmas of the last year I was at Hexo, I was bored on the Christmas vacation, and I started making mushroom chocolates because I had a non-compete with Hexo for cannabis chocolate. So I'm like, you know what? They can't do anything to me if I make mushroom chocolate, right? I really wanted to get back into chocolate. So I started making mushroom chocolates. Over the course of the Christmas holidays, like I made like a good amount of money in 2 weeks. I was just like, what the, right? So, you know, I worked on that for a little bit. The brand was actually going really good. I started talking to people in California, Oregon, all the places where, you know, mushrooms were decriminalized, and like, guys, what's it going to take for consumer packaged mushroom chocolates? And they're like, oh man, you're like 2, 3, 5 years out. So I'm like, okay. You know, still plugging away at Hexo, and they ended up offering me a director role. And I was like, you know what? Like the Kevin O'Leary quote went through my head: a salary is a drug that they give you to make your dreams die. You know, so I told my wife, you know, they offered me a director role. She's like, oh, congratulations, you know, all excited. I'm like, listen, I'm quitting. She's like, what? I'm like, you got to give me 1 year. I'm like, please, 1 year. I've got to try this. Like, I can't look back. You know, after this 7-year journey, I can't look back and say, what if? Right. So, you know, she graciously, you know, she gave me that. And I had nothing on my plate at that time. I had nothing lined up. I just left. You know, luckily enough, you know, I had a good enough reputation in the industry. I was actually able to, you know, get some consulting gigs real quick. You know, so I had a little bit of money coming in where I started building Rosin Heads, right? And, you know, I got Rosin Heads to the point where like I had a manufacturer lined up. You know, I had the products, I had the labels, I had the bags, I had everything. I didn't have a sales license. I made 2 phone calls. You know, I ended up meeting with WeedMe. So WeedMe was, so when I quit Hexo, WeedMe actually had a marketing coordinator job on LinkedIn. Like low paying, you know what I mean? Like just, you know, a coordinator job. But I was like, you know what, this will pay the bills, and it's in Pickering. So I sent in my resume, and I got a message on LinkedIn almost immediately from the CEO, Terry, saying like, I have your resume on my desk. I think, you know, I think you'd make a great addition. Please come in and talk to us. So I went there, and, you know, I ended up meeting with Benny, and, who's the president. And, he's like, yeah, like, you know, we hit it off right away. And he's like, yeah, I'm going to hire you, but like not for this marketing role. It's like, you know, I want you to help us with product launches and stuff. I ended up developing, you know, like, their diamond infused pre-rolls, and, you know, like, helping them figure out, you know, how to do the blending, all that. And then TerraSend. So my old boss from Hexo, ended up being the general manager of TerraSend. So she ended up calling me and offered me consulting there. So when I was at TerraCenter, I had all the products, I had everything ready to go. I called Benny and I'm like, hey, do you want to launch my chocolates? He's like, so, we negotiated, we figured out he's going to launch my chocolates. We got some listings in Alberta really quick. Got some listings in Ontario. But then my manufacturer
and that was under the Weed Me label though, right?
In Alberta, the first
that was under Weed Me though. It wasn't under Rosin.
Yeah, because there's there's a registration process you have to go through in Alberta, where they do like background checks and everything. And I just didn't want to go through it. So I'm like, well, why don't we just launch under your brand in Alberta?
Yeah.
And then Ontario under my brand. And the reality is the brand that I was working on, the mushroom brand, basically became Rosin Heads. And Rosin Heads, actually, the name actually came from the mushroom brand as well, as I was basically in a parking lot selling my friends some mushroom chocolates with, and they were Buddha heads at the time, right? And they were airbrushed, they were gold, they were beautiful gold Buddha heads. And he asked me, do you want to make rosin chocolates? And I was like, yeah, Rosin Heads, let's do it. And, that's, it literally came about like instantly in a parking lot. You know what I mean? Like everything with this has been so organic. Like it's, I fly by the seat of my pants kind of thing, but like you can see it's well thought through. This is what's fun to me. You know what I mean? This is what keeps me going. I have a 7-year-old daughter, it's my family and my business, you know what I mean? And like the fact that I'm in a position where ideas, can pay my bills, it's crazy, right? It's absolutely crazy.
Well, that's the dream. That's the dream, right? Is that your ideas become something tangible and eventually pay the bills, and that's what we want. All right, so we go through the trait. You got mushroom. We know where Rosin Heads is born. Now we want to understand a little bit more before we get into. You've got a lot of products and different SKUs that are available in different markets, but I'd like to understand the differences, because not all edibles are created equal. Sometimes there's rosin, sometimes there's resin, but sometimes there's distillate. And we want to understand the differences. And we can keep it just as simple as rosin or hash rosin versus distillate. Is rosin a superior alternative for infused edibles?
Look, my opinion, it is obviously, but
You're somewhat biased.
the reality is with distillate, even with vapes, it's one dimensional, right? Especially with edibles, I was people always told me that distillate did two things for them. It either made them like lethargic and lazy, or else like it gave them anxiety.
Okay.
The reason why I like rosin is, I actually like the taste of weed in my edibles, and I actually like one of the funnest things that I do is trying to mask the rosin flavor in my chocolates. You know what I mean? Like, but it's full spectrum. I find, there's better flavor. There's no solvents. That's really, really the bonus, in my opinion. The effects are just way better. You know what I mean? And the fact that I can only deliver 10 milligrams per package.
Right.
People tell me that, they feel 10 milligrams, right? Whereas a lot of people with distillate edibles, they don't, right?
Well, that's a good point. That's a good point, because I've spoken to friends, family before where, they'll have tried a certain gummy or something, and I'm like, well, was it distillate or what? Because they'd be like, oh, it's just a waste of money for me. I'm not even, I don't even experience anything. And that has been the experience for myself as well, as the vast majority of edibles I've tried that are distillate infused. And I'm not poo-pooing on that. I'm just saying, for me personally, I find that, and it's no different than the beverage category. If I'm consuming a hash rosin at a beverage, I get an effect off that. I'm not high, but I'm good, right? And it's clear. It's not, sometimes I'll get headaches or whatever it might be, or as you say, lethargic. So I do find that, that is the case, especially with your edibles, and you're using rosin, and, you can feel that effect come up and fade, and there's no crash, right?
This goes back to the conversation about the feedback loop, right? And, just real quickly, so a lot of the other LPs that I've been at, they pay for segmentation data, they do consumer research, they do surveys, and, the consensus is always like consumers don't want the taste of cannabis, and everyone was always very cautious. With my feedback loop, I knew that that wasn't the case, right? It couldn't be bad cannabis, right? Like it has to be good cannabis, right? There's a very different,
Oh yeah.
there's a big difference in the taste, you know what I mean? So, right. And, the reality is to me, it's more true to the flower effects, you know what I mean? Like it's more natural, the high and everything, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So as of right now, I mean, depending on the dispensary, where it is, or through medical platforms, et cetera, that you've got you've got coins and different flavors, you've got truffles and different flavors, you've got your bars, which I love that they're a full size bar, right? And like you get my money every fucking week, man. Like
So
seriously, that's like my weekend treat. But you've gone further now. You've done dab collabs with who was it? Distinct, is that right? I think
yeah,
you did a
Distinct
dab
and
collab
Final
with,
Bell. I've got something really cool
yeah,
coming up next. There's some really cool stuff.
yeah, and
Yeah.
and the infused pre-rolls, I mean, those were fantastic as well. But then you've got some other things. I don't know if you can talk about what's coming or if you want to, but no, you can't. He's
Well,
just
I mean, I
can't really say
can, but
that.
I'm trying to be very vague. And if you look at my Instagram recently, you're seeing a lot of bread. The fact that it to me is hilarious. So I'm posting like slices of bread with peanut butter, slice of bread with jelly, with absolutely no context. And the amount of stores and the amount of people that are reposting this, without knowing why they're reposting it. I think it's great, right? That people support the brand so much. So, I'm teasing something out. There's going to be some really cool marketing coming. And I made jokes, at the office the last couple of days, like the intention until June 15th is like to make people think I've completely went off my rocker. And it's not necessarily shock marketing. It's more like, what is this guy doing now? Right. Because everybody knows, like I've got something up my sleeve and I always do. Right. Like,
Yeah.
so,
Yeah. That's one of the beautiful things about Rosin Heads.
yeah. And the reality about all the different formats and chocolate and everything else, like with the coins, you see, I have one piece, I have two pieces. There was a lot of experimentation early on. I kind of know what's working now. I know what's not working as well. So you're going to see less chocolate. There's always going to be, some strong ones in the no, there's always going to be super strong chocolate in the portfolio, but literally like I don't need 12 chocolates at OCS. You know what I mean?
Sure.
It's far too much. And at every LP that I've ever worked at, I preached focus. You know what I mean? And I lost that focus for a little bit, but I wanted to understand really quickly what was going to work and what wasn't going to work. So I could iterate and I could plan better. You know what I mean? So, like I've got my 2025 roadmap completely done and there's 3 versions of it, right? There's the version, if I maintain exactly the plan, which is what happened with my 2023, 2024 roadmap. I held exactly to that plan. You know what I mean? There was only one SKU that was added that wasn't in that plan. So I have that version. I have another version. It's if I want to get aggressive with SKU launches, which I'm sure that I don't, but then I also have another version that basically just lists all the possible products that I could launch based on what I have developed already. And like,
Yeah.
Well,
you seem to be a master at getting SKUs listed. Right. So, and I wonder if this goes back to working with, the product development and getting into, because OCS is not an easy nut to crack, but you seem to have figured out, one, it's either OCS is smart enough to see it's strong marketing because, in the case of any retailer or OCS, they want to see that you've got a marketing background of some sort, or you're going to be able to market, period. So, but you've got multiple, be that GLs or flow through, you have multiple, and I would think the vast majority, if not all that you take to them, they go, yep, we'll take it. Right?
Yeah, it's a running joke. Like, my
how much are you paying them? That's what we want to know.
No, it's just like, it's a running joke at the office. Like, like I'm pretty much batting 100, you know what I mean? There's been a few, that I haven't got. but I go in very focused for the most part. And I remember when I was first getting edibles listed, Lorraine had hard questions, hard. Like she challenged me to no end. She had my back up against the wall. Like I had never been cornered so good. But the way that I answered her questions, like, I think she instantly gained a lot of respect for me in that pitch. And like she sees the potential. This is what it is, right? Like, and I laughed when you said I have a lot of SKUs at OCS. I have far too many, right? Like, and I know by the end of the summer, I'm probably going to delist about 4 chocolates, right? Just to make room for new stuff. And the reality is the chocolates that I have coming out are better than what anything that's ever launched. I'm very mindful of not wanting to be a one-hit wonder. So, I've saved the best recipes, right? Like I launched the raspberry peanut butter cup first, knowing that strawberry was better. And strawberry's on market now. I have better. You're going to see better. But the OCS sees the potential. I honestly believe in my mind, I have far too many SKUs for my sales. Do you know what I mean?
Okay.
My sales,
yeah.
I don't know that my sales necessarily justify the amount of SKUs that I have, but they see the potential. I know that there's been some internal presentations at OCS where they've highlighted like hidden gems in certain categories. And, I've come up more than once in those meetings, you know what I mean? So, I think they love the story. I think they love, how authentic it is. And, I think they want to see the little guy succeed, right? Because, it's me against the world here, right? It's literally me against the world here.
Yeah. Everyone's always hard on OCS and it's so hard to get in there. And when you do get there, it's death. It's come on, like this, everyone wants to be in this market. And if they didn't have the control over what they were doing, we would be blasted with 3,000, 4,000 SKUs in market. And no one's going to survive that type of a market. David Lobo and the team that he's assembled over there, they do a fantastic job at ensuring the products coming through and the ones that they list or allow on flow through are ones that the consumers are saying they want because they do study the analytics. They understand what's coming through. So we're excited about, what's going to come. Please, please, please don't take away the rosin sticks. Please, please, please. Unless you share the recipe. We'll be like Seinfeld where, Elaine finds the recipes. You'll have to send me the recipe and teach me how to make them or something. But
so what sticks? What sticks? Because there's 3 of them. Which one don't you want?
Not the wafer. So it's the hash, the original one that I had tried when you're like, if you've tried that, you need to try this. And I think it's just the hash rosin stick.
Yeah, that's the caramel shortbread. Yeah.
Good God,
yeah.
that's
That's
my
the one.
that's my
That's the one.
kryptonite. That's my kryptonite. And I always do this. I'm like, oh, I'm only gonna have half, and I'll have half, and then I might go smoke a joint, and I come back, and I'm like, fuck it, I'm eating the other half right now, right? And sometimes I'll get into a truffle too. But anyways, we've been doing something really fun where we have our previous guest ask a question of the incoming guest, and they don't know who it's going to be. And they don't necessarily know because we've had guests that are outside the industry as well. It's just an overlap. So we do this. We present you with a question from last week. And in this case, oh my God, I just drew a blank. Wes, who did we have on last week again?
It was Alana Davis.
Oh, Alana Davis. Oh my God, who's got me completely hell-bent on now trying a dab. I've only dabbed a couple times. I don't have dab rigs or anything, but she's sold me on it. So we're going to ask a question that Alana had posed for you. She didn't know it was you. And then we have you come up with a question that we pose to the next incoming guest. So, Wes, do you have Alana's question ready?
Yeah. So, Todd, Alana's question from last week was fairly straightforward and simple. What was the best piece of advice you've ever been given? It doesn't have to be specific to business or to cannabis, or it seems like it's more of a general question. What's the best piece of advice you've ever been given?
That's a good one because I've been very fortunate
That's a thinker.
I've been fortunate to be around a lot of smart people, over the course of the last 7 years, like very, very smart business leaders. Even to this day, that's one of the great things about, being in the weed me environment. There's, some really sharp people there. What's the best piece of advice? I don't know that this is the best piece of advice, but this might have been one of the things that, potentially changed my life. When I was doing Canada Chocolatier, one of the brothers at the private equity company I was working with pulled me in his office. He's like, Todd, are you paying taxes? I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like, are you paying taxes? I'm like, it's illegal. He's like, no. He's like, you have a chocolate company. He's like, incorporate your chocolate company and pay taxes. This is 2017. He said, Al Capone got busted for tax evasion. He said, pay your fucking taxes. Kicked me out of his office. That was the beginning of me becoming a business, a corporation. That was the beginning of it becoming real. So I don't know that's not good advice that's going to help anyone right now, like, unfortunately, but like those words,
think it is, though.
Those
I
words
think it
changed
is.
my fucking life.
It makes a lot of sense, right? Because it sets you up for so many things. One, it helps, disconnect you from any criminality, right? As he said, Al Capone got busted for tax evasion. But also it gives you a platform then where, one, it feels more formal. So you're going to be more intentful with everything you do because now it's based on a corporation, right? Corporations are psychopaths, by the way, if they were a living entity by themselves. But outside of that, it now gives you the opportunity for lending and debt financing and all these other opportunities that come in. But plus, you're viewed as legitimate within a marketplace that you're trying to do business in or conduct business in. So I like it. I don't think that, it necessarily is bad, right? This is a good answer. Like it's a good answer, period. But what I do want is, you've been around the block, you've seen a lot of things, you've been at different LPs, you've had your challenges, you've tried different things and moved different SKUs, you've gotten lots of different SKUs moved into different markets. I'm interested to hear what your question is for the next guest.
What do you feel is the single biggest challenge in the Canadian cannabis industry today? Probably
single biggest.
Because, there's a lot of challenges, right? And there's certainly a lot of things that we could complain about. I think what separates, people is, people that complain versus people that accept and do. There's something to be said about that. You know what I mean? Because I don't think anybody's super happy about, a lot of things. And, we could waste a lot of energy.
But everyone's dealt the same hand.
That's it, right? I could spend my time being angry, or I could spend my time working around, right?
Yeah. Everyone has to deal the hand they're dealt, or play with the hand they're dealt. And in this case, it's not like the deck is stacked towards one individual. It's the same. And the rules are the same province to province.
I'd actually follow that up with like, the decks are actually stacked very hard against people like me. Like, I'm like there's not a lot of people, that, are able to achieve this, on their own. You know what I mean? And the reality is, I think, one of the reasons for talking here is, I saw you a message that one day on Instagram. I said, guys, I'm like fucking invisible here. Or I think it was LinkedIn even, right? Like knowing the strength of the brand, knowing the strength of the product, and the reality is, I'm a niche brand. There's people that know who I am and they seek me out no matter what category I go to because they know that I stand for quality, right? But for the people who aren't completely into cannabis, where it's not a big portion of their life, I don't fucking exist. You know what I mean? And I certainly don't exist in the media, because a lot of the media is paid for. Like, I just don't exist, right? And because I'm one of those guys who wants everything to be organic, it's like, can I get some visibility in this industry? You know what I mean? Like, it's crazy, like being around for as and like, let's be honest, there's a lot of companies that don't want to see me succeed. Like I've gotten letters from Health Canada, like direct complaints, you know what I mean? Like where like people have went to the extreme of, manipulating screenshots, like manipulating search results and taking screenshots and sending them to Health Canada, like trying to, get me in trouble and like literally trying to take food out of my daughter's mouth. Cause like, that's what this is about. Like, I'm trying to feed my family and that's it, right? Like, no one's getting rich here. I can tell you that, is my family eating? Yes. And that's the dream for me. And like, the funny thing is, 6 months ago, if you were to ask me what's going on, I would say living the dream, but it was very sarcastic. Now when people ask me what's going on, living the dream, but it's for real. You know what I mean? But there's a lot of people that don't want to see me succeed. And it's crazy to me that corporations with this much money, this much shareholders, this much are going after me. And that's what nobody in the legacy market ratted me out. You know what I mean? And who the fuck am I to have a multi-million-dollar corporation to think that I'm affecting their revenue in any way? Like, I'm sorry that you guys aren't doing good, but like, leave me the fuck alone and let me live.
When another company, we look at that and we say, one, you're doing something right because you're pissing someone off, and if they take the time to narc, then it means you're doing something right. And the organic growth is very difficult, right? Especially in this weird muddy water of the cannabis industry, because you've got ones that, even though, even high flyer media, we're doing better than the vast majority of multi-million-dollar companies, and only because we could be in the black by $1. Like, it only takes that much, right? But when you see some of these large, and not all are the same. Obviously, there's certain ones that are a lot more inclined to narc out other companies. But when you go to the means of you're going to manipulate what you're sending to Health Canada to narc out a company, especially someone like you that is very genuine, that wants to see the industry succeed, you're just trying to do your best, and you're supporting other companies as well. But that organic growth is difficult, right? Because it's a muddy area, right? And it's tough to see that. But when you want to stay true to your roots, true to the passion of why you started what you're doing, you want to see that success. And sometimes it's banging your head against the wall going, why? Like, why am I not seeing this, right? We do think that, for Rosin Heads especially, you'll see continued growth. But you're right, the new entrants, they need to become familiar with Rosin Heads. And I think that the more distribution that you have, the more that, the buyers and the retailers and the bud tenders understand your brand, either through this format or what you already pump out. I think that helps, right? And understanding that story is why we exist. That's what the entire intent of why we set out to do what we do is to share that story. And your story is incredible. It needs to be shared with everyone so they understand what Rosin Heads was. Because it was, Shattered Sweets, and going back before that, what was the one before that? Edible Edibles. Maybe that's a Legacies first that's popped out. But, the progression is there. And you can see that it is a very polished brand with a good marketing sense and understanding, what it takes to get product to market and innovation. And just because you have 12 SKUs out there doesn't mean that they're all going to stay. You're doing your trial and error in a different way. But the difference being is that this is the market that's been created, right? This is how you have to test. Hey, is there validity behind the SKU that I'm working on? Because you're not going to get a focus group together necessarily. And even if you could, it'd have to be non-infused, which is bullshit, unless you've got a research license, which good luck fucking getting one of those. Like, it's crazy. Well, you're super humble, and we appreciate everything that you're pumping the market. Don't take away the hash or the rosin sticks, please. And if you do, we'll share the recipe. And Wes knows I'm dead fucking serious. Like, that is my go-to.
I'm the same way. I'm the same way.
But anyways, Todd, it's been absolutely awesome catching up. Obviously, we chat whenever we can, but getting you on Legacies has been a goal, and we managed to finally get you in. Continued success. We know we'll see it, and we'll follow the story along and continue to support. But otherwise, it's been a pleasure having you on, man. I love shooting the shit with you and getting your perspective. It's been refreshing.
Hey friends, guess what? It's almost t-shirt season. You ready? You should be rocking your favorite brand. Head on over to thehighflyer.ca and check out all the licensed cannabis brand swag that we've got available. From Moto to Victoria Cannabis Company, Smoker Farms, Royal Harvest, the list goes on and on. And there's more coming on every single week. Check it out, add it to your cart, and be prepped. Sun's out, guns out.
Well, he's one passionate dude, eh?
Passionate dude who makes delicious chocolate.
I didn't realize until I started researching. I mean, I knew he had different iterations of his brand, but I didn't realize like how far back it went. But it's nice to piece all that puzzle together and start to understand, you know, what that story was and how Rosin Heads became Rosin Heads.
I love we kind of echoed this on a couple of episodes now. It seems to be a theme that we're having of we talk about the not giving up. The most successful brands are successful because they don't give up. And just his sentiment there where he was talking about, he submitted like 40 decks, and it would be easy to, after that first 3 or 4 times pitching that deck, to give up and go, fuck, obviously I'm not going to be able to do this, right? But to keep going, iterate on your deck and iterate on your pitch. And again, just speaks to the people who are successful don't give up.
Yeah. And there's one other that we'll start using as well, because Todd pointed it out without necessarily putting a lot of credit to it, but he surrounded himself with some intelligent people, or at least individuals that you could learn from, right? And, I always go back to the old, show me your friends. I say this to the kids all the time, and I think they're fucking sick of hearing it, but I'll say, show me your friends and I'll show you your future. If you surround yourselves by individuals or with individuals that are successful or are proving to be successful, and they're not just, playing video games all day and that's all they want to do in life, then chances are you will be successful. It's that influence, that outward influence that is continuing to shape your perspective and your mind and continuing to build and grow. And Todd had that, regardless of his, his history and what he went through. I could just imagine though, you're a black market dude. Can you imagine me back in 2016, 17? I'm like, listen, guys, I know you've got millions of dollars sunk into this cannabis facility, but hey, I've got an idea for you. I couldn't imagine. And I mean, this was at a time when the edibles category had not been completely fleshed out. They didn't know what it was going to be. They didn't know, would they allow gummies, cookies, chocolates, beverages? Like they didn't know at the time. There was just speculation it was coming and there would be room for it. So good on him. I mean, he's kept at it. And, he's also said that he feels invisible at times, and which is difficult for me because, I mean, he's got one of the largest followings when it comes to, socials. His brand stands out. The black and yellow. I mean, it always stands out. And he, it's just perfection. And I think that's what it is that once you try his product, and that's really all it takes, because we talk about this a lot, which is consumer advocacy, right? And having someone become your own brand ambassador, without paying them. They just recommend and enjoy. We do it not because, Rosin Heads is a brand partner, where we certainly don't get paid by doing it, but it's like, if you want premium edibles, especially in the chocolate category, it's Rosin Heads. It always is.
I think it's interesting on that point as well, because we had conversations this week at Grow Up, and we've been talking about how typical brand loyalty may not exist like it does in the beer space, right? Where it's people, tend to stick with their beers or stick with their brands and stuff. And we had, I think Jazz had said it, and I think a couple others had said it, where they feel that might not particularly be the case in the cannabis industry. People are always experimenting and trying different flower and different pre-rolls and stuff like that. I don't know if maybe just with my own experience with edibles, while I do like to jump around, I think edibles might be a subcategory where you might start to see that brand loyalty. Like there are just certain edibles that are your edibles. I don't know. I mean, I don't know, if you're the same way, but
it could be. I mean, I'll try. I like to try a lot of different ones, but I always come back to comparing everything to Todd's products. And I don't know if I haven't made a direct relation to or correlation to, is it because it's rosin, right? Is that why? Like, and I'm just not getting, because even you've bought plenty of edibles. That's kind of the space, the 2.0 category. You kind of live in that a little bit more. And, you're like, fuck, I didn't, there was no effect. It tasted like shit. It was stale. It was this, it was that. And in some cases you've reached out to those brands with zero response. And yet you have the mainstays, which are, I have to, if I'm getting any different brand, I always buy Rosin Heads too, because I don't want to be disappointed and go, oh, I'm replacing one. It's never a replacement, but I'm certainly more inclined to try across the categories. But I come back to Sheesh, Rosin Heads, like in those categories, there's my mainstays.
Yeah, agreed. I don't think it's just the live rosin though. I think his chocolate is just really, really well done. It's superior. I've yet to pick up a bag of his where, you know, there's melted chocolate in that bag or something's leaking.
Right.
Or
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
I don't think it's just the rosin aspect.
It's that tempering class.
It's an overall well-rounded product, well researched, well executed, and
Yeah.
it is a pinnacle. It is a one.
And
of
you
a
have to
pedestal
think too,
measure
Wes.
against.
You have to think, because we've seen where it's like, did you just throw shit together and throw it in a bag? And you start to question, his margins can't be as good if he's got to be taking a touch of a hit if he's pumping out premium products, because the price points are not unlike the vast majority of the other products that are air quotes similar, right? So makes you wonder anyways. But great conversation, Todd, incredible guy, incredible story, and we're glad that we were able to share it. So hopefully everyone else enjoys it. We certainly did. We had a lot of laughs, and we got him to open up. Holy shit. You know what it's like having a meeting with Todd. Sometimes it's like, I don't know if he's gonna like be boisterous or open, or it's like
like
extracting.
you talked about.
Yeah. So
But,
anyways, it was a great conversation. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Legacies. We'll see you next week.